This episode has been sponsored by Meter, the company building better networks. If you're a technology business leader today, you're facing some really big challenges. CapEx and OpEx expenses continue to go up. There's a shortage of highly skilled networking professionals, and you want to make your teams more productive while also bringing down your total cost of ownership. Well, I've got some really good news for you. Meter is going to help you achieve all of that. Meter delivers a complete networking stack, wired, wireless, and cellular, in one integrated solution that's built for performance and scale. Meter has an entirely different business model. They're going to take on all of the risk for one predictable monthly fee. For new networking installation, they're going to buy out your existing hardware and they'll install the new hardware. And if that hardware actually evolves and actually improves over time, they'll even upgrade you for free as that technology changes. With Meter, businesses are getting fast, secure, and scalable connectivity without the complexity of managing multiple providers or tools. How great is that? More simplicity, we all need that. Meter's single integrated networking stack scales from branch offices, warehouses, and large campuses all the way to data centers and is designed to give you deep control and visibility. Meter is reimagining what it means to get and stay online. To schedule your demo, go to meter.com/market impact. That's METER.com/MARKETIMPACT.
Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another great episode of Market Impact Insights. You know, in our careers, it's all about this continuous momentum. It's a trajectory that sometimes can go in unexpected directions. And sometimes we have all that wind behind our sails and things are going well, but then we can sometimes hit bumps in the road. And there's this concept, this phenomenon called quiet takedowns, where leaders are literally just extracted out of an organization, but done, at least the attempt is to do that in a subtle way. It's happening to a lot of women leaders, but for all leaders, this notion of quiet takedowns, what does that mean in terms of lost potential? What does it mean in terms of the impact of the affected leaders? What does this mean in terms of a healthy culture? And what do we really want in terms of really growing leadership that is more about empowerment than command control? Of course, servant leadership, which is the foundation of the podcast. We're going to get into all of that with Shannon Nutter. And Shannon is an advisory board member, but she's also got extensive leadership experience. She was the chief product and experience officer at Vanguard. Now, that's an investment manager, well-known and respected, over $9 trillion in assets. So we're talking global scale there, but she brings that leadership perspective into this conversation, which is an important one. Shannon, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. Happy to be here.
So let's go back. And you've had this amazing trajectory and experience as a leader, but what originally sparked your passion now to be helping leaders and organizations reach their full potential?
Well, you know, if I think back, way back, I've just always had an interest in business. I was one of those annoying kids that used to scour the neighborhoods selling greeting cards or seeds. And I used to go into my dad's business. He ran a business. And I would resell him his own office supplies. And he put up with me. But I think there's always been something that intrigued me about business. I have no other explanation for it, for what I used to enjoy doing as a kid, other than there was just something about it that interested me, both the people side and the business side. And, then you go to school, I get out of college, I actually start working in business, and I became a leader. And I realized how powerful great leadership can be, that there is this tremendous power in caring for and developing people that report to you. There's real power in understanding customer data and customer needs so that, right, you set sound strategy, you actually design the right products and services, and that leaders hold tremendous power in driving results, whether that's holding people accountable, ensuring that they have clear communication, and maintaining focus. And at the end of the day, I think both people are really complex and business problems are really complex. And I just love that complexity, I guess, of, really figuring out both the people side and the business side, and finding solutions to that. And I think leaders developing their leadership critical to making all that happen.
Yeah, there's really something about that business leadership dynamic too, because it feels like you're in the midst of trying to solve this really intricate, complex puzzle. And you're putting some of the pieces together, but you're never quite yet at the end. You haven't put the last piece in place. And so there's always that, and it seems like there's that motivation or incentive that there's still more work to do.
Oh, always, always. I mean, if you think about a puzzle piece, I think in business, you never put the last piece in because the puzzle itself is always changing in some way. If you think about the market is always changing, customer needs, customer wants are always changing. And so there's never the last piece, but I don't know, I think that's what makes it interesting.
Absolutely. Now, when you reflect back on your journey so far, what's been some of your biggest learning, and have there been surprises for you along the way?
Oh my goodness. So many learnings, so many surprises. We could talk the entire time about that, I think. um, but I will say that a huge learning for me over the years has been the power of vulnerability. I think as a young leader, my vision of leadership, and you referenced it at the very beginning, it was more in the line of a leader is someone who has all the answers, who is completely sure of themselves all the time, who is more directive. You referenced, the old style command and control leadership. And I think that's what I originally thought good leaders were. And as I grew in my leadership and saw different leadership examples, I realized that that wasn't the best way to drive great results. And I will say, back in 2017, I had sort of a personal medical issue that required me to be out of work for a little while. And I really learned the power of vulnerability. And today I would say I embrace it as core to my leadership style. That, when I build teams, I focus on prioritizing a sense of psychological safety and trust. I build teams who actively debate each other and aren't afraid at all, at all, to tell me when I'm wrong. And these types of teams, I think when you have that kind of trust and that kind of safety, they support each other. And they are both empowered to do the work, but also know that they're going to be held accountable. And I think there's a real power in that dynamic. And as a result, I think these types of teams do the most amazing things. So, yeah, I think vulnerability probably the biggest surprise for me over the years, or the change maybe in my leadership style.
Yeah. I mean, there's the openness to evolve and to change and not just kind of stay in this comfortable zone that maybe was kind of your early leadership mode. And I'm really glad you brought up the accountability, because I have conversations all the time. And there are some people that actually will push back on servant leadership and believe that that is a soft and non accountable approach. And actually, the argument that I make back to them is actually it imposes greater accountability than micromanaging, because you've seen this and you've experienced this in micromanaging. When there's the hovering type of approach, your team basically they get conditioned to that, and pretty much they throw their hands up and say, you know what, I don't need to take initiative. I'm
Yeah,
just going to wait for Shannon or Dan to just swoop in and just basically tell us,
yeah,
how to do it all. And so what you've done is reduce the sense of personal accountability Whereas in servant leadership, where you're empowering and saying, hey, we've got alignment on what those outcomes are going to be. And now I've got your back, and I'm going to remove those barriers. And I'm here as really to support your success. Well, you've really risen that and you've grown that personal accountability, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, and then I think that's part of what creates this dynamic that when people know they're accountable, but they also have this real sense of trust and safety with their team, they're much more willing to come to their team and to you as their leader to say, "Hey, I am accountable for this thing, and I'm worried it's not going well, or I've reached an obstacle, and I need everyone's help." And in my experience, those are the teams that, people will immediately lean in and say, I've got time. I've got some ideas for you. And I couldn't agree more. I think it makes people more accountable than I think if you're telling everybody what to do, they have zero accountability. They can always look back and say, well, that's what you told me what to do. I knew it wasn't going to work, by the way, but you
But
said
I
I
did
could do
it.
it, so I did it. Right.
That's right. And all right. So you've spoken about this trend of quiet takedowns of
Yeah.
very talented leaders. It's happening. It's real. What's really going on out there?
It's interesting. There certainly seems to be a trend of women, I'll say in particular, I know it's happened to men as well. I've been specifically talking to women, so I'll speak about that. Of being pushed out of organizations, I will say sort of either at the peak or as they're reaching the peak of their power, their influence, their know-how, really. So somewhere in their 50s, early 60s, although I've definitely talked to women where it's happened earlier in their careers. And it's quiet in part because many of these women sign NDAs. And so they don't speak about it afterwards. And, there's a media sort of focus right now. A bunch of articles have come out just in this past week or two about women, quote, opting out of the workforce. But I think is that the reality is many women are being exited, and they simply can't find other roles, maybe because of their age, maybe because of how experienced they are, or because, their confidence has really taken a hit due to what's happened to them. But it's interesting because Julia Carrion, another Wall Street executive, she and I started writing a book um, really about the systemic issues and bias that exist for women in organizations. And one part of this book focused on takedowns. And I said, hey, why don't I write a post for LinkedIn? Let's see if we can get other women to talk to us about their experiences so that we can do a little bit more analysis on what's really going on here. And the post went viral. I ended up, at this point, I think I've done over 100 interviews with women around the world. And what was fascinating to me, Dan, is that the characteristics of the people being pushed out were shockingly consistent. These are strong, high performing women willing to speak truth to power. And, you know, something was happening in their organization. Sometimes it seemed like they had dissented with someone in power. Maybe they had challenged the status quo. So there was something power related or politics related that potentially was a trigger for their takedown. Sometimes it was due to organizational shifts or environmental shifts, a reorg, a new boss, something along those lines. And then sometimes it really seemed like it was performance related. These were all people that were high performers. So they exceeded goals, but maybe they challenged compensation. Maybe they challenged the workload they'd been given. Some women were holding 2 or 3 jobs when they were taken down. So it is a complex issue. I don't think there's one thing going on, but I feel certain, having talked about this topic, and I'm going to continue to talk about the topic on LinkedIn, that something is happening. It's not random.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing a really important voice and amplification around this. And I know that post well because that's what brought us together. I reached out. It really resonated, and it was just, to be able to help get this message out. And it sounds like a lot of the behavioral kind of trigger for this may be around like discomfort or
Mhm.
feeling threatened or intimidation, whatever those psychological things are
Yeah.
happening by the quote powers that be. But it's sad because what a waste of incredible talent, and then the loser ultimately is the organization, right? Because
Yeah.
those leaders are exiting.
Well, yeah, you're not only exiting really high performing women, you're exiting people who are willing to speak truth and to sometimes say the uncomfortable thing, this isn't working well for the company, or something negative is happening over here. And you need, as leaders, we all need those people who will tell us the hard truth. We all need those people that will say, I know you love this, but here's what's really
Yes.
happening. And to purposefully exit those people is a real shame, and only it will only hurt the company in the long run.
Yeah, I think there would be a ripple effect too, because maybe some of the teams that are seeing this happen, there's this maybe not explicit, but just kind of understood. Hey, this is what happens if you speak the truth and you
Yeah,
stand up, and so it can have that ripple effect of people saying, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm gonna just kind of curl back and just stay quiet
yeah,
and suffer in silence.
yeah. Let me put my head down. I'll say yes, and my paycheck is secure. And I can understand that. I mean, I can understand the desire to do that when you see what's happens to other people who don't. But at the end of the day, we know that that doesn't drive the best results.
Yeah, and it seems like there's companies out there that just seem to be in a constant state of change, but
Mhm.
kind of like intense change, a highly dynamic, volatile, high stress, and just not great in terms of what's going on and what's going on with these organizations that just seem addicted to this kind of chaos.
Oh my goodness, it is crazy. I mean, I've used that term before, more as a question of, gee, are some firms addicted to chaos? Because, like you said, I've seen these companies that seem to be in this constant state of reorganization or a constant state of, I'll say, quote, transformation. Something is being transformed. And at the end of the day, I think that many leaders, many companies confuse activity and results. So you see companies today, they're firing hundreds, if not thousands of people. And then a month later, there's hiring ads out there. They're hiring back the exact same types of people they just let go. Um, Companies that are outsourcing technology, right? They're transforming all their technology. We're going to outsource it to this firm, and then a couple years later, they're insourcing it all again. Maybe they're hiring some sort of consultant who is reorganizing entire departments into new structures, and then again, 2 3 years later, it's all happening. They're reorganizing in some other fashion, and this just seems to be this rinse and repeat cycle. So there's lots of activity, lots of time being spent on these things, lots of effort, lots of money. And I assume someone in the organization, hosts of people, are claiming credit for, oh, look at all these things I've done. I outsourced this, we're changing that, we've reorganized this department. But they're not necessarily driving better results. And as we've talked about good leadership, I mean, I think good leaders recognize the difference between those two things. And I'd love to see more leaders and boards, frankly, challenge this chaos, right? And really focus on the results and get to the bottom of it. What are we really driving? Are we really driving positive results for our clients, for our shareholders, for our employees? Or are we just creating a lot of change and chaos?
Yeah, how powerful would it be to see a C suite basically have that collective commitment to say, we're going to reduce chaos. We're
Yeah.
not going to introduce more of it. We're going to reduce it. And I also have always wondered, is the just change for change's sake, which is driving some of that chaos, is that a time buying strategy
Yeah.
sometimes to just say, well, hey, because we're making another change, that can kind of give me a little more breathing room to say, well, you got to give us a little more time to try to get to some of those. Maybe it's financial results or customer growth or whatever. I always thought maybe
Yeah.
there was something behind that.
Oh, I'm sure that you are right. That notion of, well, we can't do this big strategy this year because, well, we've got to let the reorg settle. you know,
Yes.
we're shifting everybody around. We actually can't get to the big project. So yeah, I think there are a host of things, right? When that becomes your activity for the year, you're not making much progress on anything else.
Yeah. Now I've talked to so many founders and CEOs on the podcast, and they say that developing and maintaining a healthy culture is one of the hardest things they've ever done. Shannon, what do you think is really required to be able to do that?
I agree. I agree with them. First off, I think too often culture is almost described in ways as if it's a nice to have. I don't know if you've heard that as well, or that sort of tone when people describe culture sometimes.
Yeah, it's almost like it's this ancillary thing that, it'd be really wonderful if it just kind of goes in a nice direction. But let's get back to focusing on these other things.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's almost as if like, well, that'd be icing on the cake, but it's not the cake. And I think it is the cake. I mean, I think culture underpins everything you do in your company. It's how you work, it's how you communicate, it's how you deal with accountability, it's how you deal with failure, it's how you develop talent, it's how you make decisions. I mean, I think all of that is part of your culture. And in my experience, building and maintaining a healthy culture requires daily effort. And it takes EQ, which is not always a strength of every leader. I think great culture requires genuine care for people, whether they report to you or whether they are somewhere else in the organization. I think it takes a willingness to listen, to be vulnerable, to be open minded. And I think when you can do all of that, it fosters the kind of foundational trust that allows people to collaborate, to problem solve, to drive results. So when I say, I think it's foundational to everything, I do think it creates the environment in which people can flourish and then great work can be done.
Yeah. And another thing that seems to drive it too is intentionality,
Yeah.
right? I mean, just having a very explicit desire and intentionality around the development of that culture. Because without it, again, my experience has not been that magically, organically, without that intentionality, that things go in a positive direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why I say I think it takes daily effort. I know from my teams, whenever I start working with a new team or new people in terms of a board position or an advisory role, right? I very clearly communicate this is the kind of relationship, I want with you. This is how I want us to work together. I mean, essentially, I'm describing the culture, right? For a team, this is how I want our team to work together and to communicate, and what I want the atmosphere to be when, as we're working, as we're driving results. Here's how I want us to think about problems and failure and experimentation. And I think the more you can articulate that, like you said, it's intentional. It's not happening by mistake. You're going in with a very clear idea of this is what I want to create because I think it drives the best results. And now I'm going to work really hard to make that happen. And I communicated it to you because I want you to be clear on what I'm trying to do. And I want you to participate in that.
Yeah, and it's so fundamental that even when it comes to competitive differentiation and long-term,
Mm,
growth, and the idea that if you truly believe that quality of people, so being able to recruit and retain top talent, if that's vital as part of achieving that, well, Gen Z, I mean, a lot of this research, right, on the new generation, right, that younger generation of workers right now, and what they care about, it all points to, really being explicit about what you stand for as a company. The values, right, is really important to them, and the seeking of empowerment and a clearer career path. I mean, all that stuff that runs counter to that traditional mindset of command control kind
yeah.
of thing. So it seems like there's a huge impact there too, just from a recruitment and retention of talent.
Yeah. And I think, I can't remember the stat exactly, but I read something earlier this year that said, one of the key reasons people leave a job within 90 days is because they get there and the culture wasn't what was promised. They expected one thing. Maybe, companies said how collegial they were and how much they worked well together and, focused on innovation or whatever it might be. And they got there and very quickly determined that wasn't the case. And so they left. And you think about how much it costs to recruit people, to find talent, to interview, all the time and the effort. I mean, that's not what you want. And obviously, as we've said, right, it's you're not going to get the best results when you have a negative culture.
Yeah, it's kind of the ultimate bait and switch. And the
Yeah.
other commentary that's really been out there is that if you start hearing the words "we're family," that's the red flag moment, right? That seems to be the real hot button. Is when that is said, then that, oh, wait a minute, okay, there's something else happening here.
Yeah. I have heard that as well, and I have thought, yes, there are many companies that say that, and I think that there are many companies that are pretty dysfunctional families.
For sure. Now, we've touched on some different aspects of leadership, but at the end of the day, what do you think
Mm.
truly separates exceptional leadership from just good enough?
For me, I think there are sort of two fundamental things, and I've referenced them a little bit, but I think exceptional leaders demonstrate a genuine care for the people that work with them. And I think that that leads to the positive cultures that we've talked about. And and I think that they exhibit a genuine care for clients. And so they actually deeply care about the mission of the firm, of what they're trying to achieve. They want to build products and services that actually fulfill the needs of those people and do it in new and better ways. And so as a result, they're not focused on empire building. They're not focused on their own ego. I think those two things, if you're genuine about it, right, create a lot of goodness and really drive excellent teams, excellent results. And those are the kind of leaders that people remember.
Yeah, you bring up an important point in terms of that relationship between employees and team members as well as customers. And I think we've all experienced something in our own lives around, maybe it's a service business, and you can just tell that frontline employee they're not happy and they're not bought in to what's going
Yeah.
on. And it just makes maybe a bad situation. You're dealing with customer service situation, technical support. It only makes that worse, right? And so what is that ripple effect to you're going to lose customers as a result of it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been in different service industries before where um, two employees are talking about, how unhappy they are, at this particular company. And you think, okay, this is not the best customer service experience.
Uh,
Right? Like
yes.
I'm being served in whatever minimal way, is needed. But now the two of you are basically talking about how much your manager stinks or whatever. And you just think, oh, that's not great, right? not only do they don't feel cared for, so they're not making the customer feel cared for, but it's also very clear they're not being developed. They're not being valued, right? Frankly, at that company.
Yeah. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Mm. Early in my career, I used to always answer this with, "You don't get what you don't ask for," and I think that was a great piece of advice very early in my career. As somebody sort of moving up the ladder, where it was like, oh, ask for the new project, ask for the new responsibility, because they might not give it to you otherwise. Um, but now I think I would say relentlessly focus. And I say that because I think now if you want to accomplish anything, no matter what it is, right? Something personal or something in business, you have to be able to turn your ideas into action. And in order to do that, you really have to focus to get it done, to show up every day or whatever period of time that it's going to take, and continue to chip away and until you finally do accomplish it. And it's just so easy to get distracted by new ideas, some interesting work that maybe you're more passionate about. You don't like finance, but you like marketing, and so let me go think about this marketing thing over here. And so, yeah, I think focus. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah,
It's too
that's
easy. It's
huge.
too easy to be distracted.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there some tools and approaches that you found have worked for you to be able to really maintain that kind of focus?
Well, I guess for whatever, the advice I give other people, and I try to adhere to it myself. um, whatever I'm doing, I try to make sure I have either a clear strategy or a clear plan for how I want to get that accomplished. And I ask myself, or I ask people I'm working with, regularly, if you're doing something that isn't aligned to that strategy or to that plan, you really have to force yourself to say, why am I doing that? Why am I spending my time on this particular thing right now? Stop it. Go back, focus on the plan, be true to that, or align your task to the strategy. Um, and it's just a diligence, right? It's sort of a diligent prioritization continuously to ensure that your effort is focused in the right way.
That makes a lot of sense. And the other part of it is probably a mindset shift to where you can get yourself feeling more comfortable and guilt free of saying the word no.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Um, Definitely. I mean, and probably that I think about that in line with prioritization. That as you prioritize, there are lots of things that you could do, and you have to be able to say no to a whole host of things, um, and only focus on the critical ones. And it is, I think anyone can write a to-do list for the day, and you can cross things off, and maybe you get that dopamine hit, you feel good about, oh, look at, I did this, I did that. um, but at the end of the day, you might not have done anything related to whatever your biggest goal was. And so you really have to ask yourself, well, I know I did a whole bunch of things, but did I do the things that were most critical for me in accomplishing what I've said I want to accomplish for myself, or
Yeah,
what
it's
my
all it's
team
the
needs?
relativity to the outcomes is really what
Yeah,
we want to make sure that there's always a clear relativity
yeah.
to those. Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about the future, what's making you optimistic?
Mm. Oh, there's so much to be concerned about, but a few things I'm really optimistic about. You mentioned one of them earlier, and that's Gen Z. So I have two Gen Z children. One is in the workforce. One is actually going to go to grad school. But I think about Gen Z going in and continuing to enter the workforce. And I'm excited about how they might rewrite the rules and really challenge the status quo. So I think that's going to be fascinating to see because I just think they are different. and I'm here for it. I really think they have some interesting perspectives. So that's the first one. I would say, secondly, I'm excited about women getting louder. We talk about quiet takedowns, and I'm ready to hear women's voices um, be more present in our society, whether it's regard to takedowns. There's a lot of talk about the healthcare gap. Women are not just smaller men. We actually need more research on women's bodies. A lot of talk about the bias in VC funding for women founders. So I just love that more women are speaking up about these issues, more men, more male allies are speaking up about these issues. So that's the second one of women are getting louder. And then thirdly, I'd say innovation. I just think around the world, there are amazing people either trying to leverage tech in new ways or just finding new ways to improve the world. And I'm excited to see what all of that is going to do in the coming years and decades to come.
Yeah, I know on the VC funding, I think I saw a stat. It kind of blew my mind actually. And I may have gotten this wrong, but I think it was something like only like 2% of kind of the entire pie is
Yeah.
really being allocated to women founders. It's a very
It's a
small percentage, incredibly small.
It is an incredibly small percentage, and yet, interestingly, the data shows that female founders make better use of capital than men, getting a much stronger ROI for that capital. So, hopefully, as some of this data continues to be shared and shown, some of those things will change.
Now, do you have any other final advice for leaders that are looking to increase their positive impact and elevate the performance of their teams?
Oh goodness, there's always so much you could say. I'd say when it comes to teams, invest in your people, stay focused, and hold yourself and others accountable. I think that, from a team perspective, encapsulates a lot of it. And then for leaders themselves, I would say, don't be anyone else's version of a leader. And never ever shrink yourself to make someone else comfortable. Be really true to who you are.
I love that. That's the exclamation point around authenticity. Shannon, thanks for joining and sharing your perspective, really raising awareness around this terrible thing, these quiet takedowns, but also championing moving past this addiction to chaos and creating a better pathway for women leaders, for all leaders, that's empowering and not commanding and controlling. Thanks again for joining. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, likewise, Dan. Thank you so much for having me.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback that helps make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving us a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.